My stay here was difficult primarily because what was new was jogging.
Tom Waits, the gravel-voiced poet of American music, built a career out of being unlike anyone else. His songs were raw, his voice was jagged, and his stories painted the underbelly of America in haunting colors. But now, at 75, the man who once stood as a defiant outsider is living a life that is far quieter, and some say, heartbreakingly sad. Tom Waits was never meant to be a typical rock star. In fact, when he first began performing in the late 1960s, audiences weren't sure what to make of him. He didn't have the looks of a teen idol or the polished sound of the radio-friendly pop singers of his time. Instead, he sounded like he had lived 1,000 lives. His voice cracked, growling and full of grit, as though it had been soaked in whiskey and smoke for decades. Yet behind that voice was a storyteller unlike any other. Born in Pomona, California in 1949, Waits was raised in a working-class environment that shaped his worldview. He often spoke of how his parents' divorce when he was 10 left him restless, searching for belonging. By the time he was a teenager, he had fallen in love with music. Not the shiny, chart-topping kind, but the blues, jazz, and beat poetry that celebrated imperfection. Waits began playing in small bars and coffee houses, developing a persona that was part drifter, part street poet. He'd spin stories about characters on society's margins, the lonely, the drunk, the broken dreamers, and wrap them in melodies that sounded like they were recorded in some back alley club at 3 a.m. His first album, Closing Time, 1973, didn't skyrocket to fame, but it introduced the world to a voice that couldn't be ignored. Critics quickly realized that Waits was a songwriter's songwriter. Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen praised his work, and artists from the Eagles to Rod Stewart began covering his songs. But Tom Waits was more than just a songwriter. He was an architect of mood. His concerts weren't traditional performances. They were like strange plays where Waits became a carnival barker, a broken-hearted bluesman, or a wild preacher. He slammed doors for percussion, growled into broken microphones, and created a world that was uniquely his. Fans didn't just listen to his music, they stepped into his universe. By the late 1970s, Waits had built a cult following, but it was in the 1980s that he reinvented himself completely. With the help of his wife and creative partner Kathleen Brennan, he moved away from the smoky piano ballads of his early years and embraced experimental, almost surreal sounds. Albums like Swordfish Trombones, 1983, and Rain Dogs, 1985, changed the way people thought about music. They were raw, percussive, and utterly unconventional. Yet they cemented Waits as one of the most original voices in American music. His career wasn't just about albums. He ventured into acting as well, appearing in films directed by legends like Francis Ford Coppola and Jim Jarmusch. His presence on screen was as enigmatic as his music, unpredictable, magnetic, and entirely his own. But for all his success, Tom Waits never chased stardom. He shunned the spotlight, rarely gave interviews, and avoided the trappings of celebrity. While others sought fame, Waits sought authenticity. That choice made him one of the most respected artists of his generation. But it also set the stage for the quiet, almost invisible life he leads today. By the time he reached the height of his influence, Waits had become something of a cultural ghost, an artist admired from afar but rarely seen. And now at 75, his life looks far different than the wild, unpredictable performances that once defined him. Tom Waits never fit the mold of a conventional artist. In the 1970s, when the music industry was busy chasing polished pop stars and radio-friendly tunes, Waits carved his own path. He blended gravelly vocals with poetic, often surreal lyrics that sounded more like beat poetry than traditional songs. His raspy voice became his trademark. Some said it was the sound of whiskey, cigarettes, and midnight alleys all rolled into one. What made Waits truly unique was his ability to tell stories through music. He didn't just sing. He painted pictures with words. His songs captured the grit of everyday life. Lonely drifters, worn-out barflies, and forgotten dreamers. Critics hailed him as a modern-day troubadour, someone who could turn despair into beauty and darkness into art. Albums like Closing Time and Rain Dogs proved that he wasn't chasing commercial success. He was chasing authenticity. That's why his fan base grew loyal, not because of chart-topping hits, but because he spoke to the misfits, the outsiders, and those who felt unseen. But fame never sat comfortably with him. Unlike many of his peers, Waits rejected Hollywood glamour and refused to play by the industry's rules. He was known for walking away from opportunities that could have made him a household name. Some called him stubborn. Others called him a genius for staying true to his art. His offbeat performances, eccentric interviews, and refusal to conform only added to his mystique. In an era when many artists were eager to be idolized, Tom Waits chose to remain an enigma, loved by millions yet still existing on the fringes of mainstream culture. By the time Tom Waits entered his 50s, he had already cemented his place as one of music's most unconventional legends. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who either faded into obscurity or chased mainstream approval, Waits embraced a quieter life. He stepped away from constant touring and recording, preferring instead to spend time with his wife, Kathleen Brennan, who was not only his life partner, but also his greatest creative collaborator. Brennan helped shape his career from the mid-1980s onward, steering him toward experimental sounds and giving him the confidence to fully embrace his eccentricity. The couple raised 3 children together, and for Waits, fatherhood became a more important role than fame. He often spoke about the joy of living a normal life away from the limelight, grocery shopping, cooking dinner, and keeping the family grounded. For someone whose songs often painted haunting portraits of broken souls and grim realities, his private world was surprisingly stable and full of love. This domestic life gave him balance, keeping him from the destructive cycles that consumed many other musicians of his generation. Yet, stepping away from the spotlight came with a price. As the years passed, younger audiences often didn't know who he was, and his legendary status became something spoken of mostly among older fans and critics. While his influence on artists like Nick Cave, Bruce Springsteen, and even Lady Gaga was undeniable, Waits himself chose not to bask in the recognition. He declined interviews, rarely appeared in public, and often turned down award shows. His fans admired his integrity, but it also made him seem like a forgotten figure in modern pop culture. In the early 2000s, Waits released Alice in Blood Money, 2 critically acclaimed albums that showcased his ability to fuse strange sounds with haunting storytelling. But after Bad As Me in 2011, he quietly stepped away from releasing new music. He didn't announce a retirement. He simply disappeared. Fans wondered if health problems or personal struggles were keeping him away, but Waits never offered an explanation. That silence only deepened his mystery. As he aged, Waits also became more reclusive. Public sightings grew rare, and when he did appear, fans noticed how frail he looked compared to his fiery stage persona of the past. The man once known for wild performances and unpredictable energy seemed to shrink into the shadows. Despite his fading presence, Waits' legacy never dimmed among those who truly understood his artistry. His music wasn't meant to dominate charts. It was meant to last, to linger in the minds of listeners long after the last note. And even as the industry moved on, Tom Waits remained a symbol of what it meant to be authentic, uncompromising, and deeply human. But behind that legacy, there was also sadness. At 75, living a mostly quiet private life, Tom Waits embodies the bittersweet truth of many artists, celebrated for their genius, but often forgotten by the fast-moving world. He is still here, but his voice, once the sound of rebellion, is now a whisper, heard only by those who still seek him out. Today, at 75, Tom Waits lives far from the glitter and noise of Hollywood and the music industry that once hailed him as a genius. He resides quietly in Northern California with his wife, Kathleen Brennan, the woman who has stood beside him through every triumph and every struggle. Unlike other stars of his generation who constantly seek the spotlight, Waits seems to have embraced invisibility. He rarely gives interviews, rarely attends events, and hasn't released a new album in over a decade. For many fans, his silence feels like an open wound, a reminder that the world may have heard the last of his gravel-soaked voice. Waits' withdrawal from public life has fueled endless speculation. Some believe declining health has forced him into seclusion. Others argue that he simply grew tired of the industry and wanted to spend his final years living as an ordinary man. Whatever the reason, the mystery surrounding his current life only deepens the sadness. Seeing an artist once so full of creative fire reduced to near silence has been difficult for fans who idolized him for decades. There are whispers that Waits spends his days in routine simplicity, tending to his home, spending quiet evenings with Brennan, and occasionally visiting with his now-grown children. He has been spotted a handful of times by fans, usually looking frail but still carrying that unmistakable air of eccentricity. The man who once howled on stage with reckless abandon now walks slowly, his once unbreakable energy dimmed by age. Yet, what makes his current state especially heartbreaking is that Tom Waits never chased fame or fortune. He chased truth. His music was about giving voice to the forgotten and broken. But now, in a cruel twist of fate, he himself has become somewhat forgotten. Younger generations, raised on disposable pop hits, often don't know his name. The industry that once praised him as an innovator rarely mentions him anymore. For an artist who gave so much, this quiet erasure feels unjust. Still, Waits's life at 75 is not entirely tragic. He has what many of his peers never achieved: stability, family, and the chance to age gracefully outside of scandal and destruction. He avoided the excesses that destroyed countless musicians of his era. In many ways, his reclusive lifestyle is a triumph of survival. But for fans who long for one more song, one more performance, or even just one more glimpse into his strange and beautiful world, his silence feels like loss. As the years pass, every update about him carries an unspoken fear that the next news may be about his passing. It's a heavy reality for fans who consider his music a lifeline. His absence from the public eye has created a void, and at 75 it seems unlikely that he will return with new work. Instead, what remains is his legacy, a body of music unlike any other, songs that sound like stories whispered from a dark alley or sung by ghosts in a bar at closing time. Tom Waits' life now may be quiet, but it is also a reminder of the cost of brilliance. His art demanded everything from him, and now he chooses to live in peace. It may not be the ending fans dreamed of, but it is the ending he chose, a man who walked away from fame to preserve his soul. Still, watching such a luminous talent fade into silence is undeniably heartbreaking.